Here. I have someplace hopefully, a wonderful letter Paul got from Gene when he had his 50th birthday. So he turned 50, he got this letter from his mom, and I just had it in my hands within the last 2 weeks as we were going through things to prepare for the birthdays and stuff. And so in it, it basically said, and I lost it right now, I can't find it. In it, Gene told that he was a deer hunter baby. Okay, which makes sense. Deer hunting starts tomorrow, right? Well, yeah, you're right, today. So what happened is Grandpa Norm and the doctor all wanted to go deer hunting. So they made Gene go in the hospital and forced delivery so that he came out as a scrawny, long, 21-inch, 6+ pounds baby. 6.5. Rhea has a little more detail than I do. And so he is a deer hunter baby. I can't imagine them doing it now.
Grandma said he looked like a plucked squirrel when he was born.
Yeah,
But in 3 months, she had a nice roly-and-pulley.
yeah. So that is the start of Grandpa Paul. Now, Uncle Steve here is the oldest in the family. Steve, what do you remember of Paul growing up?
Well, so many things, and everybody knows, the stories about blowing up the kitchen and all,
No, they don't.
Really? Well,
No.
somebody else would probably tell that one, 'cause I'm not sure I was there, but, one of the things I remember that,
You were kind of on the older side when the kids were going, weren't you? You heard that?
Yeah. but, not that much older than Paul, but enough to be kind of, a little bit different world. But anyway, but one of the things I remember is when Paul and Maria would sing at the talent show over in Gregory Park.
Right.
And,
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just,
It doesn't work anymore.
I just thought that was so sweet, and also bold, because I know I wouldn't have had the nerve to do anything like that. But here Paul, who I always kind of thought of as being shy, but I was shy too, so what do I know? But anyway.
Tell about that.
Having the
Singing in the
bravery
park.
to get up and do that, and Maria's always been a ham, so that didn't surprise me. It just surprised me a little bit more, but I just thought that was so sweet.
Yeah, I think
Plus,
she
they won
forced me
the
into it.
contest a couple of years in a row, so doing duets, so.
Yeah, and in Brainerd and Gregory Park, they had their Halloween contests and their Halloween costume contests, and then a different talent show, Diane. Okay, different talent
Summer, I
show.
think.
Summertime was a talent show.
Summer was a talent show. Okay, so what did you do at the talent show?
Well, the first year we sang If I Had a Hammer,
Oh,
and we took first place. So then we did it again the next year, and we sang If I Wish I Were a Highness Aurelius or Rapid
you gotta sing that one for
You
these
guys
kids.
should
The
sing it.
It's not
grandkids,
very
Yeah,
appropriate.
the grandkids have no clue what that song is. They probably don't know the other
Do you
one.
remember any of the words?
Well, I do remember the words,
Paul
but
remembers,
you have to take it in a grain of salt of the lyrics.
okay, why don't you two stand up and
I
do
don't know
that?
if we're gonna have the same lyrics.
Oh, it's pretty, I mean, just
the
that,
rest of us all know
I
it
wouldn't
too.
let my
They'll
kids
know.
use those
Yeah.
words
They'll all
today.
help you, they'll all help you.
But, they just can't call people those names.
Oh.
Wish I were a highness Aurelius or Rapid ho 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 ho. But since I'm not, I never could hope to be.
Serious Tammany.
I am an egghead, I am a dope, so I think I'll bash my head against the wall.
Wham, wham.
And we won. I mean,
That was it?
I don't know where the bar was.
Farmer Brown, you put it down.
Oh, wait, that was mom. That was mom.
No,
you guys did that one?
I never did it. But we used to do that one for family all the
Well, I
time.
thought you did that for the.
No, those were the two we won on, and then the third year, he wouldn't do it. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go do it by myself, and I didn't even place. So it was all about Paul. Without him, I couldn't do it.
And how old were you guys at that point?
We were talking about that this morning. I was probably like 8 for the first one, maybe?
That
8.
was South Canada.
So then you
Pretty
would,
bad.
you were, Yeah, so if you were south of 10, then I was 3 years younger than whatever you were. So we were little.
Yeah.
Which is why you were cute.
Oh, they
Yeah,
were.
Back then, we were
Then we stopped
cute.
being cute,
Yeah.
so.
That was the problem.
All right, can you tell us about Elmer the Talking Tree?
I have that in my book too.
That Elmer?
I didn't remember his name, but I was just saying like here, I just bullet pointed for myself some of my big memories, and that talking tree was one of them.
Cool.
So tell the
So
kids,
what's-
grandkids don't know.
So you want my
Yeah.
version of it?
Yeah, your
Yeah.
version.
Yeah, because the version of the story, I'm sure, will be different no matter what the story is. So. Yeah, but basically in the front yard, we had a couple of elm trees. And the elm trees had a big crotch about 10 feet up or so. And I put a loudspeaker in there and ran some really fine wires to my bedroom, which was facing that tree. And I wired up an amplifier so I could talk to that loudspeaker. I don't know how old I was. It wasn't very old.
I was pretty little, so.
And every time one of the neighborhood kids walked by, we had to say hi. And they're looking at the tree, and pretty soon there were a bunch of neighborhood kids gathered around it, talking to Elmer the elm tree. And that went on for several days, I think. And then for years after that, the kids would ask, whatever happened to Elmer the talking elm tree? And I'd have to tell them, oh, he's asleep.
The very same principle of Paul Bunyan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was.
Nothing different. Paul Bunyan was a little more impressive.
But to those
If you could
kids,
make the elm tree, move its hands, you would have
Yeah.
been a real winner.
they're,
It would have moved its arms with.
Well,
with legs.
if it is a little Ryan from next door.
right. Kevin Doran,
Kevin Doran, I see him on TV all the
Oh,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
TV all the
he's
time.
famous.
When I went to college, first year I meet people, you know, new kids and stuff, and they'd ask me where I'm from, I'm Brainerd. I said, how did Paul Bunyan know my name? Because just about everybody had been to Paul Bunyan at some point, and, you know, hello, little Stevie.
Paul Bunyan knows everything.
Yeah. I don't know, I never did figure it out. No, I knew a guy who was the voice of Paul Bunyan, one of the high school kids.
How about forts? Forts in the backyard,
Down in the swamp.
down in the swamp. How many
They were
forts?
secret.
It's a secret.
Nobody can talk about
Only them and
them.
the fire department knew about it.
I don't think the statute of limitations is run on that.
I was asking about that the other day.
Keeps. So, yeah, they make all kinds of forts because Grandpa Norm, actually being a contractor and a construction person, you had all kinds of materials around. So I know that you guys love making your forts.
I know, I built a new fort every year for many years.
Well, because then it
Because
would
the
flood.
floods would wash them away.
And you wait for it to dry again and go build new ones.
We never
But it was
used.
to the point where Mom would call the fire department and say, hey, Roy, it's Gene, and he'd say,
Right.
I'll be right over.
Yep,
Yeah, that
I have
actually
that down
happened.
as my note too. The burning of the riverbank dry lowlands, you know, Gene would call up the fire department and say, this is Gene, be right over. Because they knew, you know,
The
yeah.
fires happen that often.
Yeah.
And then the kitchen burned down, and suddenly they actually had to come with seriousness.
Yeah.
A real fire.
So let's talk about blowing up the kitchen. The grandkids have heard a touch about it, but I don't think they've heard the story, so tag,
It all started with making flares.
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 Rocket fuel.
It was rocket fuel.
Well, yeah, but the rocket fuel started with flares.
Ah,
I
okay.
learned that if you mix potassium nitrate in a dash of sugar, that if you light that on fire, it flares up nicely. And
Understanding chemistry, kids.
Is it true that you would buy this stuff over at Elvig's, and Mr. Elvig would say, what are you doing with this, son? I hope you're using it responsibly.
I don't think he ever asked,
No,
but he darn well knew.
Buying nitric acid and sulfuric acid.
Yeah, no, those were dangerous.
All right.
So we had to buy them at separate places, but the first place had called the second place to to tell them we just bought this. So we couldn't make the nitroglycerin or whatever we were making.
What a bummer.
So back to
So,
the.
so anyway, I learned if you mix potassium and nitrate, which is saltpeter, with the sugar, it would burn. And if you mixed it better, it would burn faster. So pretty soon I learned you mix it with the powdered sugar and get it all mixed much finer, and it burned even faster yet. I'm going, okay, how do I get it to mix even better? And I tried to melt the sugar, which we did outside. You know, you mix it and then you melt it. But the flash point was about 2 degrees above the melting point, and and that didn't work out very well. And finally, we dissolved it in water. And when you dissolve it in water and then evaporate the water, it left a gray plastic-like stuff. And the first time I did that, I did it in a tin can over a gas flame of the stove until most of the water evaporated. And you take a chunk of the little gray plastic stuff and you light that on fire, and it will go and fly away. I'm going, oh, this is really cool stuff.
Was that one of the fires that started in the backyard?
No.
Honest.
Oh, I can tell other stories about that. But after we burned up all the chunks, there was still about a quarter inch of the stuff stuck in the bottom of the tin can. So I went outside and put a fuse on it and set the can sideways. This was in the winter, so there was lots of snow. And let that on fire, and the can took off, shot across the yard like a rocket, hit something and stood straight up, and shot flames that were higher than the house. I'm going, oh, this is really cool.
I was there, I saw that. It was very impressive.
Yeah, it was. So I was in a rush to make batch number 2, and we mixed it all up, and I was I was holding it over the flames of the gas stove, and I realized that you can't burn water because it takes away all the heat as it evaporates. So I turned up the flames a little bit, and I forgot that you can burn milk, and even though it's got lots of water in it. And I had just looked in the can and turned it away, and a fraction of a second later, the whole thing ignited and shot flaming rocket fuel all over the ceiling, some of it on the floor, some of it on me,
And the curtains.
In the cover.
and the curtains, and lots of smoke instantly.
And Mom had
And
just
all-
walked through, came home from work and said, what are you doing? And you said, I'm making rocket fuel. And she's like, you are not, turn that off right now. And whoever your friend was said, go home.
I don't remember hearing any of
Well,
that.
and she said she walked out of the kitchen and didn't even make it to the living room.
This stuff was inside,
That might have been why I turned up the flames.
To try to burn it up.
was inside a coffee can when it's ignited, right?
It was more of a soup can.
Now tell how you got what you did to get that coffee can out of the kitchen before it did more damage. Anything?
Soup can? I don't remember.
You picked it up.
What,
You picked, the story I know is that you picked it up and threw it out the window.
That's my story too.
The story I remember is
Maybe
there was
part
a
of
bunch
why
of
your
it on the
hands got
counter,
so burned.
and you went like this with your hands to pull it off the counter so you could.
no, because I didn't really hurt the front of my hands. The fuel had fallen right here, and it burned the back of my hand.
Oh,
Better
okay.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the story is you picked
Mom
it
got
up
a
and
new
threw it out the
kitchen.
window, and that's when the curtains started on fire.
No, I don't think so. It burned out in seconds.
So how old were you when that happened?
High school?
No.
Kate, Sarah was a baby.
Oh, I was in
1968.
I was in 8th grade. Yeah, 68.
Yeah, Sarah was a baby.
Grandma Jean got a new kitchen.
She did get a new kitchen out of that. But then,
What did insurance cover?
so then they come and they were like putting the fans up to get the smoke out of the house because there was smoke everywhere. And all of a sudden Neil comes out of the bedroom going, "What's going on?" He'd been in there sleeping and nobody knew he was home.
Upstairs,
And
yeah.
upstairs with all that smoke inhalation, and if the house had caught on fire, none of us knew he was home. The rest of us were all standing in the front yard.
Yeah, my mom was pissed at me.
And you, why didn't you tell us you were upstairs sleeping?
I got off easy.
Right, but I walked out, as I recall, I walked out and I had to feel my way out. I could not see.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, the fireman bumped into me and didn't even apologize. I don't think he knew it was a person. And so I got outside and you were there with Mom and Ray?
Ray it was, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, I thought by that time they'd already taken him to the.
No,
No.
it was after that.
No,
and then-
because I heard, Ray said something like, so, did anybody get hurt? And Mom said, no. And then Paul said, well, actually.
Yeah. And then Ray looked at it and said, "You have to take him right to the hospital.
Yeah, those burns.
His
yeah.
burns are bad."
Yeah.
But then the other note I had in here is that then you healed them
Yeah.
through meditation.
Self-hypnosis, he
That's
called
the
it.
legend.
Sort of self-hypnosis. It did heal very fast.
I was with you at the doctor's office because I had some other reason I had to be there. So Mom took us at the same time, and when they took off the bandages, and the doctor was like, what's happening here? Because they were pretty much healed.
And he thought that they would never,
And you wouldn't take the
they would be scarred
painkillers.
all the time from the rest of your life.
First day after that, I was at school, my hand was wrapped up like this, just big mound, and I was famous then.
They were boxing gloves, basically.
Yeah,
But you wouldn't take any of the painkillers because you wanted to see if you could do it with your mind.
just focus on it. I was reading a bunch of self-hypnosis books at that time.
I
And
remember,
listening to hypnosis tapes while you were sleeping.
Yeah, that too.
I remember seeing the wound. I thought it was up part. But I remember, because I was right there, I had just come out when that happened. And I remember looking at that wound and, good God, that was like melted plastic. Your skin was like
Yeah,
plastic.
just-
It was just stringy, like melted plastic. It was really
That-
creepy.
I did recall that Tom tried up the tiny fire extinguisher on top of the fridge and was trying to put it out.
Now, there was one part you said that you're focused on part of it, but there was some other smaller places that didn't heal.
Yeah, we focused on my hand, that got all treated. There were a couple little dots on my ankle that had also burned. The hand healed real fast, the dots took a long, long time.
Because you weren't sending
I
your
wasn't
energy.
focusing on that, I guess.
Okay.
And I remember Tom was trying to tell a friend the sequence of events that happened, and it seemed like it took a half hour to walk through all the sequence, and then we realized that whole thing was about 30 seconds.
Right.
In the 30 minutes, the fire department had been there, cleared all the smoke out and left. And somehow got the curtains caught into the fan that they were.
Yeah, and they put a huge fan in Mom's bedroom to suck out the smoke, and it sucked in the curtains.
One of the other things that's a family story is the never-ending turntable for meals.
Let's talk about that again this morning too.
Well, where else do I
Well,
get
one
the
of the things
stories?
we talked about is that we didn't have a specific place at the table, any of us. Like you just kind of sat down wherever you landed that day.
And that's what a round table's for.
And there's no head of the table or anything like that. And we all eat too fast because we were worried the second round wouldn't come around. And they'd be gone by then.
And Dad would always say, he didn't need a motor, he needed brakes.
Because it was always moving.
I didn't know if I remember
And sometimes
that.
too fast and everything would slide up.
Oh, I hadn't heard that part. I just know that the rule was it could only go in one direction.
Yes.
Right.
And the other rule was if you take it on your
what's in
plate, you
front of
have
you.
to eat it.
Ah, that makes
And
sense. I
so
like
we
that.
wouldn't take too much of the first round because you weren't sure you were gonna like it.
Yeah.
And you had to eat it. And so we'd take a little bit and then we'd all be fighting for round two, whatever tastes good.
And
But
Mom
the other thing in
counting out.
the dining room, this is where it was rotten to have him for brother. Because we all got a drawer.
Yes.
But he got like 2 drawers, and one of them was really big, because he had all this big, you
All
know,
this junk.
all this junk, you know, and the rest of us had to try and fit everything into some little drawer. And it just didn't seem fair to me.
That was unfair.
Yeah, that was one of the nice things Mom had set up so that we each had a place to put our stuff and we all had different interests, so.
You had to try real estate, though.
Well, I deserved it.
He was a prime guy.
For sure. Right.
I mean, Paul would put more in his pockets than I would have in my drawer.
That is true too.
That's true.
That reminds me of when we were driving from Brainerd to Fargo and the fuel pump went out on the car. And we were like in Detroit Lakes or one of the small towns beyond Detroit Lakes. And we pulled into this, I think it was a drive-in restaurant, or, you know, like a A&W kind of thing. And we're going, well, now what are we gonna do? It's, you know, like 10 o'clock at night, it's dark. And we're going, what? You know, Paul had a pair of pliers and a screwdriver.
Yeah, and probably
his
a
pocket.
flashlight.
In your pocket.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, and a flashlight, but just a little, like a little pen light.
yeah.
So I crawl under the car and with a pair of pliers and the screwdriver, I'd look to see where the screws were and then I'd turn it off and got the fuel pump out, realized the diaphragm was torn right along the edge, so I was able to just stretch it out and put it all back together. And it ran for another 2 years, I think. I never did fix it, but without his pockets, we would have been stuck there.
Those were very bulgy pockets.
My favorite part about the table, though, wasn't the round part, but the fact that, you know, made out of white formica, and we would sit at the table and
With a pencil.
with a pencil and
Oh,
just
yeah.
draw whatever comes to mind, or do the math that we needed to do, make some kind of design. Always right on the formica, and then we'd take Comet Cleanser and at the end of the night clean it off.
Yep.
Oh, really?
And that to me was, I tell people this, it was the biggest impact I've ever, on my life as a kid, was that table. And a lot of it was the fact that we sat there and we did things, and I was too young to do any of it. But I would sit there and watch and just marvel at all this stuff going on that table.
And we had to say one thing we learned that day, no matter what it was. Every night you had to say, today I learned.
Well, if you're the second person, all you have to do is repeat what the guy just before you did.
I just learned that.
Just
he
learned it
just-
now.
I'd like to start with the
First I heard
youngest
of
going
it.
to the oldest, because then, you know, you should already know what I learned.
That's goofy.
Well, one thing that in your life that I still tell people about, and that it was an important thing in life, was the reel-to-reel tape deck that the Catholic school had. I think it was the Catholic school, maybe it was the public school, but somebody had donated a really nice, I think a TIAC reel-to-reel tape deck, and you wanted to use it for something. And they said, no, you can't use it because if we use it, it'll wear out and then we don't have it anymore. And you told them, well, if we don't use it, it's the same as not having it. And then they let you use the,
I don't remember that they ever actually let me use it.
well, I thought they let you use it, but maybe they didn't. But I
where did
still
we-
tell people, if you don't use what you have, what's the point of having it?
Right, it's the same as not having it.
How did we end up with that mercury?
Oh, mercury
You took
wasn't
that.
all
Used to
that
be able
hard
to
to
play
come
with it all
by.
the time back then.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd play with it, we'd let it roll around on our hands, and
And it would eventually always end up in the shag carpet.
Yeah,
And altogether, it explains a lot.
Well, that and we're always melting lead while we're, is it done yet?
yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah, why were we always melting lead?
Mom was trying to kill you.
No, not
just
stopping
fun to
us,
melt
they're
it.
trying to kill us. Thin out the herd a little.
Smartest person you know.
Yeah, I don't remember why we were melting it, but we were making something, we wanted to pour it into a mold.
Fishing things maybe.
Well, lead melts a lot easier than almost anything else, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of gold available.
Sit around.
Yeah. Then there were the hydrogen balloons.
Right.
I wanna hear that story, Joe, doesn't tell me you blew up the paper mill. I haven't heard that, I don't think.
Yeah,
I thought that was Doug Magden and I that did that.
basically you put a bit of hydrochloric acid in a pop bottle and you drop in some zinc and it makes a bunch of hydrogen. And you put a balloon over the top of the pop bottle and it fills it up and it floats away. And we learned how to make fuses out of potassium nitrate and toilet paper. And we could make them burn as fast or as slow as we wanted. So we would tape a fuse on the balloon, let it float away, and then kaboom!
I thought we were using dry cleaning bags.
No, that was the UFO
Yeah, that was UFOs. That's a different thing.
candle.
Yeah.
All the petroleum.
But anyway, we learned how to fine tune it so it flows up better each time. And I would balance it so that it would just barely float. It wouldn't go up or down much and just sit there. And so it wouldn't be real far away when it blows. There was one of them we made that was extra big, and we had it pretty well balanced and a slow fuse. It just kept drifting and drifting and drifting over the valley, and we had to watch really close because it was just a teeny tiny dot far away when finally we saw a flash of light, and 5 seconds later there was the boom.
Yeah, we felt it. We shook the house.
And the next day in the newspaper, there was a story about the paper mill that had a window blown in all of a sudden. And the paper mill was a mile away, just that 5 second
I
sound
remember
delay.
it as
Yeah,
more
that
than one window.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also remember it as we were so scared that Mom and Dad would figure this out that we cut the story out of the newspaper. They wouldn't see it. Yeah.
That's because of the lead and the,
Yeah, the lead and the mercury.
Seemed like a good idea.
But I remember, because it was up toward the airport, so they said, they called out the CAP, that's where I learned what CAP was, who went looking for a plane crash.
I hadn't heard that.
I think that was in
doesn't ring a
the
bell.
article, that the CAP had gone out looking for a plane crash and never saw one. Because it wasn't, it's not that far from the airport.
when I told that story to my college speech class, it was jets that were scrambled from Fort Ripley.
Gotta escalate
stories
that.
Yeah, you gotta bring it up a little bit.
Make it
Then it
good.
was sack bombers out of North Dakota.
Stories get better over time.
And Paul came that close to starting World War III.
These days, that might be all it takes.
The part I think about that all the time though, is that when you said you had a bigger one and you did something like this, it was the size of that chair. It was big.
Yeah, I remember it being
It was
big.
very big.
Yeah.
And the part I remember is that we are all gathered around this thing, waiting to watch it fly up and blow up, because it was a very exciting idea, even though it disappeared and I left. What if it had blown up right there? When all of us were standing right around it, so, you know?
And this would be a